All right, so welcome to Floater. I'm Nick Davis, and today we're going to be talking to my wife, Memory White, on her first float. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So, why did you want to float?
Why did I want to float? Well, what attracted me to floating, honestly, was just the thought of releasing some stress. Like right now in my life, I feel like I have a little bit of stress and anxiety. I'm doing a lot. And so I know that one of the benefits of floating is, it helps you with some relaxation. What also appealed to me was the spiritual component. So I really wanted to try floating for that as well. So a little bit of stress relief, anxiety relief, and also for some spiritual input.
Okay, well, good. Did you have any expectations before you floated?
Yes, I did have expectations. I definitely had expectations. Just based off of maybe a little bit of my research, mostly your research, conversations that we've had, and also from experiences that my friends have had. So the weekend that I floated was a weekend where a few of my friends floated as well. You floated, and I was the last person to float. And they all, each of my friends, had these amazing experiences, and they left feeling very, rejuvenated and empowered and just feeling really good. So my expectation was, oh yeah, this is going to be mind blowing. I'm going to feel so much, just relaxed and, so much relief and really gain some energy in myself. So yeah, I definitely went into it with expectations.
Okay. Um, so where did you float?
I floated at Still Point. Is it Wellness Center? I think is what it's called. Still Point Wellness Center. It's in Asheville, North Carolina. Very beautiful facility. I floated in a Float Lab tank. So it's a very nice tank. It's a huge chamber. I don't remember the dimensions, but it's really big and
So this
very
was
nice.
this was actually your second float, right?
This is my second float. My first float was in a Samadhi tank, which is definitely much more different from the Float Lab tanks. In the Samadhi tank, the door you have to you have to walk backwards, trying to get into it. It's a lot smaller. It felt more humid, more damp inside, so the quality of the tank wasn't nearly as nice as the Float Lab tanks. So because this was my second float too, I thought, well, maybe the first one was the environment wasn't as nice in the Samadhi tank. So I was really excited too about the change in environment with the Float Lab tank. I knew it was much better quality.
Okay. So what did you like about? So you kind of talked about the differences between the two tanks. But what else did you like about Still Point?
It was just a really, it's a beautiful center, honestly, just a really beautiful center. The person who I hate to say waited on me because it makes him sound so subservient, but the person who assisted me, his name was Paul, very kind, good energy, good spirit. And it's deceiving at first because when you first go inside, you think that it is, it's like, okay, just, it's all right, looks okay. But then the magic starts to happen when you walk into the back, and it's just beautiful. They have this beautiful fish tank in the back, and just clean. Cleanliness is very important. And yeah, just a overall just lovely facility.
Okay, great. Um, is there anything that maybe you didn't like about the facility that you would like to see in a float center or a wellness center in this case?
Not necessarily. I'm still thinking of ways to improve the experience for people of color. Honestly, people, you know, black women with like natural hair, relaxed hair. We have to do a little bit more prep work when it comes to it. It's not just washing and leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I felt like in order to plan my float, I needed to make sure I had nothing going on afterwards, because I was going to have to go home and probably re-shower or redo my hair, which takes time. And you really don't have much time to do that at the float center, because they need to clean it out and get ready for the next person. They do give you 30 minutes in between, but still, that's just not enough for someone.
They do have a separate kind of like a room with a sink, like a washroom, I guess. But they didn't tell you that, so you felt rushed.
So I still felt rushed, and two, if in that separate room, I would make sure that you have like a very nice place to put all your hair products to start the process.
Okay.
You know, because for some, like I said, for people of color, and it's my, I mean, I'm this is very a general statement, so I probably should just say for myself, but that is something that you probably think about. Absolutely. Honestly.
Okay, it's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you told us already about the tank itself. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your experience inside the tank.
Yeah. So did it live up to my expectations is the question. It didn't live up to the expectations that I had set for myself, and that I wanted this spiritual experience and to be find relief and so on and so forth. But it did definitely offer an experience. It just wasn't that. It was a different one. It was an experience where I'll start off with how I felt when I left, and then maybe I'll go into more details about actually being inside of the tank. But when I left, I didn't leave feeling highly energetic or relief. It was the opposite. I actually felt very drained and tired, fatigued, a little depressed, a little sad. And so I didn't even know how to process those thoughts and feelings. I didn't know what was going on, because for one, I did go in there with the expectation of the, of feeling relief, and then that didn't happen. It was the opposite. So I felt like it took a whole day just to kind of register what just happened. Like, what am I going through right now? Very visibly tired. When you saw me, you said, you don't even look like you floated, and then my friends, said the same. So it made me realize a couple of things. One, don't go in with expectations necessarily. Two, you may do some work in there, in that float tank, that doesn't necessarily make you feel relief and rejuvenated at that moment. You may have to do several floats because you may be bringing up some issues in that very vulnerable state that you don't even realize that you're bringing up. Mm-hmm. Now, I do believe that floating can address those issues if you do it multiple times. Mm-hmm. But I think something came up for me, and so I need to float more, and honestly to work those things out. But while I was in the tank, I did have some feelings. I had some visual imagery in my head of like being cocooned in snakes, like two snakes, like being kind of cocooned and wrapped into that. I have my own ideas what that could possibly mean for myself. The audience, you come up with your own ideas yourself, research that maybe some more, but you will probably have some type of visual imagery. Some people actually see things, but for me, it was mostly just in my mind. Mm-hmm. So just like being wrapped up, cocooned into these things. They did not give me any anxiety, though. That didn't give me anxiety, because I did go in there with anxiousness. I was nervous. I was nervous about being enclosed in this dark space. Even though this tank is a large tank compared to several other tanks, there's still a little bit of apprehension there. And so the visualizing or seeing these snakes, being cocooned in these snakes, didn't scare me. I think it was try to bring a little bit of relief from that anxiety, honestly. So I had that imagery in my head. I also got the message of "You're beautiful," which was very interesting to me.
This is true.
Thank you. You're beautiful. Oh, I also got "Be still." Be still. Which probably is what I needed, because I have a very hard time being still. Yeah. And my thought thoughts going into the tank was, oh my God, I have to be in this tank for 2 hours because I did a 2-hour float. So it was 2 hours of this, and I was just thinking, I give up. 10 minutes in, I wanted to say, I give up. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
I'm done. I don't want to do this. I don't want to sit for 2 hours. So there, I had that. But so the message I got too was be still. That came into my head, and then I started to relax a little bit more. I really took that to heart. Like I was really trying to stay still the entire time. Until I got to the point towards the end where I can't stay still any longer. So I have to move. But I don't think I had to really be that still. You can move in the tank.
Probably more still mentally.
Yeah, than physically. Yeah, very good point. And I also got feelings of, what is the point? What's the purpose of all of this?
Not just floating,
but just this life purpose that you have, and it's like the work that you're trying to do in this life. And, you're told by people that you have these skills and so you think that certain things become more easily, but it doesn't. I feel that I have to kind of fight or work for, my evolutionary goal, I guess you can say. I have to really like grit my teeth, and like do it. And so I'm thinking, what is the point of all this? If I'm supposed to do this, why is this so hard? Why can't this be a little bit more easier? So I had that thought in my head, which is actually, in retrospect, it's a theme sometimes in my life, where I'm like, why is this so hard? I get frustrated. Why can't this be easier? But that came up for me as well.
Yeah.
So that's, the imagery and the thoughts that I kind of went through while I was in there. I would give this advice. Figure out what time is the best time for you to float. I don't think that I'm necessarily a morning floater, but my float was in the morning. For me, I need a little bit more prep time in my day.
You need your coffee.
I need to drink my coffee. I need to
so you didn't have your
maybe
coffee.
Eat a little bit. Maybe make sure that I, use the bathroom because I had to pee towards the middle of the float. So it was about 30 minutes or so. I'm like, my bladder. So figure out when you float. Some people might want to float in the evening time. Mm-hmm. Figure out the best times because that too can impact your float, like all that stuff. So those are all things that people really need to think about. And then you asked if there's anything that I would improve about the still point experience. And I would say this. At the end, I had a conversation with Paul, a little conversation. I didn't realize that there was like a space where you could actually sit and take a moment for yourself to try to come to terms with whatever just happened or, in the float tank. I didn't realize that because he didn't tell me that. I think he told my friends, but he didn't tell me that. Maybe he was, registering some of my anxiousness or whatever. I was ready to get started and like get it over with. But also figuring out some way to talk to your clients who do have a harder experience. Maybe offering, recommending some type of counseling, having that information available. They don't have to do it, but because not everyone's going to have this wonderful experience.
Yeah, there's definitely
hard floats.
Mm-hmm. When you're floating, your brain is able to go into this internal state. You start tapping into some subconscious material, and some of that material might be hard. Mm-hmm. And it's not a bad thing that you're doing it. It's actually a good thing in the long run. Mm-hmm. It might just take some time to digest it, to reframe it. Floating is a tool for relaxation, but it's also a tool for that deep inner work. Mm-hmm. And that inner work is work.
It's work.
Like, memory was describing. Mm-hmm. And it's harder for some people than others. Memory is a little high strung maybe. A little, has some nervous energy to her, but that's something that she's working on. And floating can be a tool for her to relax a little bit and go into some of those maybe touchier points that she was going into. What's the point? Um, trying to figure those things out. And I think she hit the nail on the head regarding offering more support for those harder floats, because that is going to happen sometimes. And it's not a bad thing. In the long run, it's a good thing. But I think there's a lot of float centers out there that specialize in just that alone. Just kind of that somewhat of a therapy session for their floaters. But even if you don't offer that, maybe have some resources available for your clients that have those harder flows. You can kind of refer them to whether it be a hypnotherapist or a some type of counseling of some type, just so that's there. Floating it can be deep work. It can stir up some subconscious material, and that might say, oh, I don't want to have, some people might say they're not going to want that experience. They don't want to think about things that are actually important and important to resolve. But it's not a bad thing. So I definitely wanted to bring Memory on here to kind of show a different side of the coin of floating. It's a different type of work. It's more deep. It's a little more heavy.
And may I add something too? I would like to add the fact that I don't want people thinking that I'm this crazy high-strung person. I'm a very sensitive person.
Yes, yeah, very sensitive.
And I am very caring, and I hold the space for people a lot to, tell me their shit, and comfort them. And if you are a person who does that, if you are a nurturing person, a very sympathetic person, sometimes you hold it and you keep holding it, and you don't clear it. And you also take on the role a lot of times of not always sharing your feelings with everyone, because you're in this other role of you being the person the mother or whatever, the nurturer. Right. So I think that float was probably me releasing a lot of that, releasing other people's stuff, releasing my own, the anxiousness or the stress that sometimes comes with that.
And holding that space. It takes energy.
It takes lots of energy.
And it can wear anybody thin. So yeah, Memory holds that space a lot for a lot of people. Friends, family, strangers, people in the grocery store will come up to Memory and just unload. And it's just like, what? She just has that super mother nurturing, I'm safe, so let me, lean on you. And she's strong. I mean, she's,
tough.
She's very tough but that takes a toll on anybody. So that floating experience was probably the first time where you were able to shut off a lot of the distractors and a lot of the, awake states of consciousness that just keep your mind busy, and you're able to just be quiet and still and vulnerable. And when you were there, you had these kind of intense thoughts. So it's good, and I'm looking forward to her floating more and making strides, and we'll definitely do another interview a few more floats in, and see where you're at.
That's right.
Is there anything else you want to say about floating or your experience?
I would just want to end with, don't go in there with any expectations. Just have the experience. That's it. Because the work that's going to be done is the work that's supposed to probably be done. And if you go in there with any expectations, it might make the float even, harder. I was disappointed. I thought I did something wrong. I didn't float right.
Right.
And no, I did
Yep.
float. So
You just kind of have to let go and see where that float takes you.
exactly.
You might really get something valuable from it,
Mm-hmm.
and you might actually do some intense internal
Yes.
work.
Yes.
You might get some really intense relaxation physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And also, this was like really her first float.
Really.
Her real first float in the Samadhi tank. She had to get out a couple times because it was
hot.
too hot and it just wasn't regulated properly. So this was the first time she really stayed in the tank for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and also one last thing. I'm sorry, you keep thinking of stuff as you go. You also may be, for me, 2 hours was a little long. I think next time I'll try 90 minutes. So play around with your time too. So
Yeah.
play around with the time that you do it, and the time of day that you do it, and the length of time that you float.
I would say start out with 2 hours,
First
and if you
time.
want to get out before then,
Mm-hmm.
you have that option. You're not locked in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it could take it's especially for your first time. It's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve on how to actually be in that space,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's good to have that time to regulate yourself, actually relax and get into it. And preparation before the float is pretty key. You don't want to be hungry, but you don't want to eat a whole lot of food before you go in there either. You don't want to have any caffeine in your system. And memory is someone who needs caffeine in their system, especially in the morning. So
I would push my float.
So if you're
more into
that,
the afternoon
most
or
people
evening.
are coffee people in the morning. So if you have to have your coffee in the morning, maybe schedule your float for later on in the morning. 2 hours after you drink your coffee.
And after you do your work in the float tank, you might want to think about your caffeine addiction.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I like coffee, so I'm just,
Well, thanks, Memory, for sharing with us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to. I hope it helped someone.
Yeah, I think it did. All right. Floater out.
Mwah.